The call came through at 0300 hours while I was pulling perimeter duty at Forward Operating Base Salerno. My sister's voice crackled through the satellite phone, flat and matter of fact. Grandma died Tuesday. Funeral's Thursday. Don't bother coming home. I shifted the phone to my other ear, scanning the dark Afghan hills through my rifle scope. What do you mean, don't bother? You know what you did. She was hurt. You never visited after Dad's funeral. Called you ungrateful. Said you cared more about your army buddies than family. The line went quiet except for static. I waited for more explanation, but none came. When's the will reading? I asked. Family only. That's what the lawyer said. Her voice carried a smugness I'd never heard before. Maybe if you'd shown up when it mattered, things would be different. The call ended. I set the phone down and went back to watching the perimeter. My squad leader, Sergeant Martinez, looked over from his position. Everything good, Corporal? Yeah, fine. That was it. No explanation, no request for leave, no breakdown, just back to the mission. That's how we handled things. But something cold settled in my chest that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Grandma Ruth had raised me after Mom died when I was 12. Dad tried his best, but he was working 2 jobs and drowning in medical bills. Grandma stepped in without being asked. She'd pick me up from school, help with homework, and make sure I had clean clothes and hot meals. Her house on Maple Street became my real home. She was proud when I enlisted at 18. Military makes men out of boys, she'd say, pressing a $20 bill into my palm before I left for basic training. Write me letters. Tell me about the places you see. I did write. Every week from Fort Benning, then from deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. She wrote back religiously, updating me on neighborhood gossip and sending care packages full of homemade cookies and magazines. When I made corporal, she framed the photo I sent and put it on her mantle next to my grandfather's Purple Heart. But things changed after Dad's funeral 2 years ago. I'd been home on emergency leave, dealing with arrangements and paperwork. Dad had always been the buffer between me and my siblings, my older sister Carol and younger brother Mike. Without him, old resentment surfaced. Carol lived 3 blocks from Grandma and visited twice a week. Mike had moved back after his divorce, crashing in Grandma's basement, rent-free. They both seemed to view my military service as an escape from family responsibility, not service to country. Easy for you to play soldier while we're stuck here taking care of everything, Carol had said at the funeral reception. Some of us don't get to run away. I'd let it slide. People say things when they're grieving, but I noticed how they position themselves as the devoted grandchildren, the ones who'd sacrifice for family. In their version, I was the selfish one who'd abandon everyone for an army career. The truth was more complicated. I tried to get stationed closer to home, but the army sends you where it needs you. I'd sent money when Grandma needed a new roof, when Dad's medical bills piled up, when Mike lost his job. But money wasn't the same as presence, and presence was what they held against me. 3 weeks after the funeral, I was back at base when a package arrived from Grandma's lawyer. Inside was a thick manila envelope with my name written in Grandma's careful script. No explanation, just the envelope and a note from the attorney. Mrs. Henderson left specific instructions to send this to your military address in the event of her death. I opened it alone in my bunk. Inside were copies of bank statements, property deeds, and insurance policies. Everything was in Grandma's handwriting, with yellow sticky notes attached. The notes were addressed to me. Tommy, these are copies of everything. I made sure the lawyer has matching copies in his safe. Don't let them tell you different, Grandma. I spread the documents across my bunk and started reading. What I found made my blood run cold. The bank statements showed regular withdrawals over the past 18 months, large ones, 5,000 here, 3,000 there. The notations were vague, home repairs, medical expenses, family assistance, but the amounts didn't match what I knew about Grandma's actual needs. Then, I found the property deed. Grandma's house on Maple Street, the one she'd owned outright since Grandpa died in 1995, had been transferred to Carol's name 6 months ago. The deed was notarized and witnessed, but something about the signature looked wrong. I'd seen Grandma's handwriting thousands of times. This was similar, but not identical. At the bottom of the envelope was a handwritten letter from Grandma, dated just 3 weeks before her death. Tommy, I know you're busy with important work, but I need you to know what's happening. Carol says I'm getting forgetful and need help with my finances. She's been helping me pay bills and manage accounts. But money keeps disappearing and I can't get straight answers. Mike moved into the basement without asking and won't pay rent. Says family doesn't charge family. I tried to talk to them, but they say I'm confused. Maybe I am, but I'm not stupid. I've been making copies of everything and hiding them. If something happens to me, you need to know the truth. I never wanted to burden you with this, but you're the only one I trust. Love, Grandma. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter. Outside, I could hear the normal sounds of base life. Vehicles moving, soldiers talking, equipment being maintained. But inside my bunk, everything was quiet except for the sound of my own breathing. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I walked to the communications center and placed a call to the lawyer whose name was on the original package. James Morrison, attorney at law, had been handling Grandma's legal affairs for 15 years. When I finally reached him by phone, he sounded relieved to hear from me. Corporal Henderson, I've been hoping you'd call. I have some concerns about your grandmother's estate. What kind of concerns? Well, according to your siblings, you're not welcome at the will reading. They say you were estranged from your grandmother and she didn't want you involved. But that doesn't match the instructions she left with me. I gripped the phone tighter. What instructions? She specifically requested that you be notified of her death and included in all estate proceedings. She also left a sealed envelope with instructions to contact you if anyone tried to exclude you from the process. Morrison paused. Corporal, I need to ask you something directly. Were you estranged from your grandmother? No, sir. I was deployed overseas and couldn't visit as often as I wanted, but we corresponded regularly. She never expressed any displeasure with my service. I thought so. She spoke of you often and with great pride. Your siblings painted a very different picture. I told him about the documents Grandma had sent me. Morrison listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Corporal, I think you need to know something. Your grandmother came to see me about 6 weeks before she died. She was concerned about financial irregularities and wanted to make changes to her will. She suspected that someone was forging her signature on bank documents. Did she make the changes? She started the process but died before we could finalize everything. However, she did leave specific instructions about how to handle the estate if she died unexpectedly. Those instructions include a full forensic audit of her finances and a handwriting analysis of any questionable documents. Morrison's voice became more formal. I've been trying to proceed with the will reading as scheduled, but your siblings have been difficult. They're insisting on handling everything themselves and want to waive the audit your grandmother requested. Can they do that? Not without your consent. You're named as co-executor in the original will, along with your sister. But here's the thing. Your grandmother left a more recent will that changes the distribution significantly. She hid it in her safe deposit box with instructions that it only be opened in the presence of all 3 grandchildren. I felt something shift in my chest. What happens now? Now, we follow your grandmother's instructions. Can you get leave to come home? Yes, sir. I'll be there. I flew home on emergency leave 5 days later, landing at Nashville International on a gray Tuesday morning. I'd called ahead to Morrison's office but hadn't contacted Carol or Mike. They'd find out I was back soon enough. The law office was downtown in one of those old buildings with high ceilings and worn wooden floors. Morrison was in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of steady demeanor that comes from handling family disputes for decades. He shook my hand firmly and gestured to a chair across from his desk. Before we begin, I need to show you something, he said, pulling out a manila folder. I had the handwriting analysis done on the property deed. The signature is forged. He handed me the report. According to the expert, the signature on the deed transferring Grandma's house to Carol was inconsistent with known samples of the subject's handwriting and showed clear signs of forgery. How long has this been going on? I asked. Based on the bank records, at least 18 months. Your grandmother was right to be suspicious. Someone has been systematically draining her accounts and forging her signature on legal documents. Morrison leaned back in his chair. I've already contacted the FBI's white-collar crime unit. Fraud against elderly victims is a federal offense, especially when it involves forged documents and interstate banking. My siblings don't know about this yet? Number I wanted to speak with you first. Your grandmother's final instructions were very specific about the order of disclosure. He pulled out another envelope, this one sealed with wax. She left this for you personally. The instructions say to give it to you before the will reading, in private. I broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Grandma's handwriting was shaky but clear. Tommy, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you made it home safe. I'm sorry you have to deal with this mess, but I couldn't let them steal everything your grandfather and I work for. I know you never wanted anything from me except love, and you had that always. But I also know you'll do what's right, even when it's hard. The house is yours. It always was going to be. I just had to make sure they couldn't take it from you. The new will is in the safe deposit box. Box 247 at First National. Key is taped under the kitchen sink. Be strong. Be fair. But don't be stupid. All my love, Grandma. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. When's the will reading? I asked. Tomorrow at 10. I've scheduled it for here in the conference room. Your siblings think they're coming to collect their inheritance and finalize the estate transfer. They don't know about the new will or the fraud investigation. Morrison stood and walked to the window. Corporal, I want you to understand something. When this comes out tomorrow, your family relationships are going to change permanently. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Grandma's letter, about the forged signature, about the money that had disappeared while I was overseas fighting for my country. Yes, sir. I'm prepared. The conference room at Morrison's office had a long wooden table and chairs for 6 people. I arrived early and took a seat facing the door. Morrison sat at the head of the table with a stack of documents and the sealed envelope from the safe deposit box. Carol and Mike arrived together at exactly 10 o'clock. They froze when they saw me, their faces cycling through surprise, anger, and something that might have been fear. What's he doing here? Carol demanded, not bothering to sit down. Tommy is co-executor of your grandmother's estate, Morrison said calmly. He has every right to be here. Grandma said she didn't want him involved, Mike said, finally taking a seat but keeping his distance from me. We told you that. Morrison opened the first folder. Actually, your grandmother left very specific instructions about this meeting. She wanted all 3 grandchildren present for the reading of her final will and testament. Final will? Carol's voice was sharp. We already know what the will says. She left everything to Mike and me because we actually took care of her. There have been some developments, Morrison said. He pulled out the handwriting analysis report. It appears that several documents related to your grandmother's estate have been forged, including the property deed transferring the house to Carol. The room went dead silent. Carol's face went white, and Mike started to stand up. That's impossible, Carol said. Grandma signed that deed herself. I was there. The handwriting expert disagrees, Morrison said. The FBI's forensic accountants are also reviewing the bank records. They've identified approximately $67,000 in fraudulent withdrawals over the past 18 months. Mike was on his feet now. This is bullshit. You can't prove anything. Actually, we can, Morrison said. He opened the sealed envelope and pulled out a document. This is your grandmother's final will and testament, dated 6 weeks before her death. In it, she leaves her house and the majority of her estate to Tommy, with smaller bequests to Carol and Mike. She also requests a full investigation of any financial irregularities. He handed copies to each of us. I read through it quickly. Grandma had been thorough. The house, her savings, her insurance policies, everything except a few $1,000s each to Carol and Mike was left to me. But there was more. At the bottom, in her own handwriting, was a note. I leave the bulk of my estate to Tommy, not because I love him more, but because I trust him to do what's right. Carol and Mike have already taken what they wanted. Tommy never asked for anything except my love, and for that reason, he deserves everything. Carol was crying now, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of rage and fear. She was senile. She didn't know what she was doing. The will was witnessed by 2 independent parties and notarized. Morrison said, your grandmother was of sound mind when she signed it. She was also of sound mind when she contacted the FBI about the fraud. The FBI? Mike's voice cracked. Agent Sarah Chin will be here at 11 to discuss the investigation. I suggest you both contact lawyers. I sat quietly through all of this. watching my siblings' faces as their scheme unraveled. Part of me felt sorry for them. They'd convinced themselves that they deserved Grandma's money because they'd been present, because they'd helped with bills and doctor visits. But help and theft weren't the same thing. Tommy, Carol said, turning to me with desperate eyes, you have to understand. We were just helping her. She was confused about money, making mistakes. We were protecting her. I met her gaze steadily. By forging her signature? By stealing her savings? By transferring her house to your name without her consent? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said quietly. And you did it while I was deployed, thinking I'd never find out. Morrison cleared his throat. Unless there are other questions about the will, I think we're finished here. Carol and Mike left without another word. I stayed behind to sign some paperwork and discuss the next steps with the FBI investigation. Your grandmother was a smart woman, Morrison said as we finished up. She knew what was happening and made sure there was a paper trail. They won't be able to claim ignorance. What happens to them? That depends on the federal prosecutors. Fraud against elderly victims carries serious penalties. They could be looking at prison time. I nodded. It wasn't what I wanted for my siblings, but it was what they'd chosen for themselves. Agent Chen arrived right on schedule. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with the kind of direct manner that comes from working financial crimes. She shook my hand and got straight to business. Corporal Henderson, your grandmother's case fits a pattern we see frequently. Family members with access to bank accounts and legal documents systematically drain elderly relatives' assets. The forgery adds federal charges. She opened a laptop and showed me spreadsheets detailing the financial transactions. We've traced $67,000 in fraudulent withdrawals plus the property transfer worth approximately $120,000. Your sister was sophisticated about it. She used multiple banks and spaced out the withdrawals to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. How did she forge Grandma's signature so well? Practice. We found dozens of signature samples hidden in her house. She'd been working on copying your grandmother's handwriting for months, maybe years. Agent Chen closed the laptop. The case against your siblings is solid. Your grandmother's documentation makes prosecution straightforward. But I need to ask, are you willing to testify if this goes to trial? Yes, ma'am. Whatever it takes. Good. We'll need your testimony about your grandmother's mental state and your relationship with her. The defense will claim she was incompetent when she made the new will. I thought about all the letters Grandma had sent me, all the care packages, all the conversations about my military service. She was sharp as a tack until the day she died. Anyone who knew her would tell you that. That's what we're counting on. The trial took place 8 months later. I flew back from Afghanistan on leave to testify. The courtroom was small and formal, with fluorescent lights and worn carpet. Carol and Mike sat at the defense table with their lawyers, looking older and more tired than I remembered. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Patricia Hayes, walked me through my relationship with Grandma, the letters we'd exchanged, and my knowledge of her finances. She was methodical and thorough, building a picture of a lucid, caring woman who'd been systematically victimized by her own family. Did your grandmother ever express concerns about her mental capacity? Hayes asked. Never. She was worried about her arthritis and her blood pressure, but her mind was clear. She could remember details from 50 years ago and do complex calculations without a calculator. The defense attorney, a smooth-talking man in an expensive suit, tried to paint me as the distant grandson who'd abandoned his family for military glory. He suggested that I barely knew Grandma and couldn't judge her mental state. Isn't it true that you saw your grandmother only a handful of times in the years before her death? He asked. That's correct. I was deployed overseas in service to my country. And isn't it true that your siblings were the ones caring for her day-to-day needs? They were present more often than I was, yes. So they would have a better understanding of her mental condition? I looked at Carol and Mike, then back at the lawyer. If they'd been caring for her, they wouldn't have needed to steal her money. The judge sustained the prosecutor's objection, but the point was made. The trial lasted 3 days. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged documents, fraudulent bank withdrawals, testimony from neighbors who'd seen Mike living in Grandma's basement without paying rent. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Carol got 18 months in federal prison. Mike got 14 months. They were ordered to pay full restitution, though most of the money was already gone. I sat in the courtroom as the sentences were read, feeling neither satisfaction nor anger, just emptiness. These were people I'd grown up with, shared Christmas mornings and birthday parties with. Now they were convicted felons who'd betrayed the woman who'd loved us all. I inherited Grandma's house 6 months later after all the legal proceedings were finished. I was between deployments, so I took leave to clean it out and decide what to do with it. The house was exactly as I remembered, small and neat, with family photos on every surface and the smell of lemon furniture polish in the air. Carol and Mike had left it in decent condition, though I could see signs of Mike's occupancy in the basement. I found more letters from Grandma in her bedroom dresser, letters she'd written but never sent. Most were to me talking about her day, her concerns about Carol and Mike, her pride in my military service. In one, she wrote, "I know you think you've disappointed me by not visiting more, but you haven't. You're serving something bigger than yourself, and that's what your grandfather would have wanted. I'm proud of you every single day." I spent a week going through her belongings, keeping what mattered and donating the rest. I found the key to the safe deposit box taped under the kitchen sink, exactly where she said it would be. Inside the box was $10,000 in cash and another letter. "Tommy, this is for you to start over however you want. Buy a house, go to school, take a vacation. I don't care what you do with it as long as it makes you happy. You gave me more joy than you know just by being who you are. Love always, Grandma." I decided to keep the house. It needed work, new roof, updated plumbing, fresh paint, but it was solid. I hired local contractors and spent my savings making it livable. When I retire from the Army, I'll have a place to go. The neighborhood has changed some since I was a kid. Young families have moved in, and there's a playground where the old Henderson farm used to be. But the street feels the same, quiet and tree-lined, with the kind of neighbors who watch out for each other. I got a letter from Carol last month. She's out of prison now, working as a cashier at a grocery store. She apologized for what happened and asked if we could reconcile. I haven't answered yet. I'm not sure what to say. Mike hasn't contacted me at all. I heard from a neighbor that he moved to Florida after his release, trying to start over somewhere. Nobody knows his history. Maybe that's best for everyone. Last week, I was mowing Grandma's lawn when the mail carrier stopped by. She was new, a young woman I didn't recognize. She looked at the house number and then at me. "Are you the soldier boy Mrs. Henderson was always talking about?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Tommy." She smiled. "She used to tell me about you every time I delivered mail. Said you were overseas, keeping us safe. She was real proud. Thank you for telling me that. She was a good woman. I'm sorry for your loss." I finished mowing and put the equipment away in Grandma's shed. Everything looked neat and cared for, the way she would have wanted it. I sat on the front porch for a while, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes and thinking about the choices people make. Grandma had been right about a lot of things. Family isn't just blood, it's trust and loyalty and doing what's right even when it's difficult. Carol and Mike had chosen money over honor, convenience over character. They'd paid the price for those choices, but the real cost was something they probably still don't understand. I locked up the house and headed back to base. In 6 months, I'll be eligible for retirement. When that time comes, I'll have a place to go and memories of a woman who loved me enough to fight for what was right, even from beyond the grave. That's worth more than any inheritance.